If you're someone who has been thinking about going vegan, I am not here to tell you that you shouldn't go vegan. I'm just sharing the story of why I went vegan, the benefits that I noticed from going vegan, and why I decided to no longer be vegan, and where I'm at now and transitioning to in the future. Hi guys, welcome back to another video. I'm Alexandria. Right now, I am sharing content on healthy eating and how to make it sustainable and enjoyable, but I'm pretty sure I will venture off into other health topics. So I was honestly vegan for a short period of time. I really wasn't vegan for long. I was vegan from September 2019 to about 2023, I think. It's interesting because I constantly saw these types of videos on my feed of I'm no longer vegan, why I'm no longer vegan, and I never really clicked on them because I'm just like, why are you no longer vegan? Like, it's the best thing to do. Like, it's for the animals, it's for the planet. Like, that was my mindset when I first went vegan. And what kind of like really pushed me towards veganism was the fact that I work in healthcare and I see how much food really impacts people and their lives. And when I see like how much it ends up impacting your life in the future when you don't prioritize what you're putting in your body, to me, it's like I thought that veganism was the way to go to avoid all that nonsense. But over time, I realized that it really was doing more of a harm to me than a benefit to me. So I just wanted to share the overall foundation of how we got here. This is pretty funny, but I legit went vegan after I watched the Beyonce Coachella on, I think it was like Netflix or something, because like they had said that, oh, she went vegan and she had so much energy. And for me at the time, I was struggling a lot with energy and weight management. So I'm like, wow, she's in shape at her age, able to do all this movement, has all this energy. And before that, I was watching a lot more documentaries, but that was the documentary that kind of like tipped it over a scale of being like, okay, yeah, we're gonna do this. I ended up deciding to go vegan because at the time when I was working in healthcare, I was watching a lot of documentaries on health and healthcare. And one of the documentaries that really triggered me was a documentary called What the Health. It basically goes and tells about how a lot of food industries fund a lot of the organizations that are supposed to help people with certain diseases and illnesses. So for me, I'm like, it's not ethical that a lot of these companies are actually providing recipes to these other foundations, and these are the same types of foods that are causing the illness. And so from there, I just started watching a lot of documentaries when it comes to our food and how it lands on our plate. And a lot of it was ethical reasons, because I'm like, I don't want to fund an industry that I'm giving them money and this is how they're treating the animals and this is how they're treating the food before it gets on our plate. It just was very unsettling for me. And then to see the conditions of the meat and then seeing the seafood and how sometimes the food that we're buying is not even the food that we think we're buying. It was just like a lot of issues where I saw a lot more benefits of when I listened to a lot of plant-based doctors and them giving their insight on when it comes to a plant-based diet and how people have reversed diseases and how they felt healthier and better. And so to me, I was like, this makes sense. I finally understand food. To me, I just didn't understand food before I started watching a lot of food-based documentaries. I just didn't understand it. I didn't understand what to eat, what to not eat. I felt constantly confused. I felt like I was always doing the wrong thing. So when I finally found this, I found like I finally found the answer to all of my problems, and I ended up going vegan. One thing that I ended up being much more aware of as I was in my vegan journey was in 2020 of realizing the difference between vegan and plant-based. When you're on a vegan diet, it basically just means that you eat no animal products. For me, another thing that I never stopped using was honey. Like, listen, you could catch me on all the other stuff of not eating the meat and not eating the seafood and stuff like that, but when it was like, oh, that means no honey as well, I'm like, no, we're not doing that. Because when I first went vegan, I thought I had to do like everything of veganism, of using no vegan products, using no honey, eating no animal type of things. And not eating the animal stuff was pretty fine, because I'm like, at that point, I never had a craving for red meat, and I never really cared for meat in general. And then when it came to seafood, when I learned about shrimp and how it's like one of the dirtiest shellfish and how it gets to our plates, it literally completely stopped me from ever eating shrimp ever again. But I realized that I'm more of someone who is looking to go more plant-based than vegan in general, because I just don't have the energy or the patience to look at every single thing to make sure it's vegan. I just don't have the energy. I feel like if I get something and it happens to be vegan, awesome sauce. What I realized was I was getting more irritated of having to feel like I needed to swap out everything. And I'm like, I just want to focus on the food right now. Maybe in the future I'll focus on other things, but right now I just want to focus on the food. And so it's realizing the difference between vegan and plant-based, because even if you're vegan, it doesn't necessarily mean you're eating the most nutritious diet. Like if you're eating French fries and a plant-based processed burger, that's still not necessarily the healthiest. It's vegan, but it's not necessarily the healthiest. And so I started to differentiate the difference between vegan and plant-based, because a lot of what I was getting was a lot of the Beyond Burgers and Impossible meats. And one thing that I was trying to advocate was, instead of eating like animal meat, eat the Impossible Burgers. But then over time, I'm like, I'm still eating something processed. And I remember like a lot of meat people are just like, no, I'm not eating that. And at first I just didn't understand it. But then as I think about it now, I'm like, I would prefer to just eat actual real meat than to eat a processed meat made in the lab, because it may look like meat, it may bleed like meat, but is still something processed that was created. So when it came to differentiating plant-based and vegan, one thing that I started to just lean more towards was eating more natural, real foods. So if I was really craving some type of a burger, I'll just get a portobello mushroom and make a mushroom burger, or I'll make a bean burger, rather than me getting something that existed in a lab. One thing that started to become an issue was, I think it was like 2021, I ended up moving to Florida with my boyfriend, and his brother and me had like a debate when it came to veganism. And at first I was just so irritated, because I'm like, why are you debating me on this? But I like when someone debates me on something to where I see a different perspective on it, and it then starts to make me question things. Because one thing that I started doing to make sure I got all of my nutrients was, I had found like this simple guide sheet from a website, Nutritiously. It's like one of the first websites that I found when it came to going vegan, and it basically had like all the essential like nutrients that you need and the foods that are within those nutrients list. And what I would do was check off the foods that I tend to eat often, or the foods that I was okay with eating often, and whatever list had like the least amount of checks on it, then I would look to see what I was willing to eat from that list to make sure I was getting the nutrients I needed from those. However, one issue that I kept having was when it came to specifically omega-3s, because I wasn't eating salmon anymore and I wasn't eating eggs. And so the only things that I really had to rely on when it came to omega-3s was eating chia seeds and introducing that into my diet. And at first it wasn't so hard, because I would just have it with my yogurt or put it in my smoothies. But over time, I just started having less smoothies, but I didn't always want yogurt every single day. So one thing that I had to start thinking and asking myself, I'm like, am I willing to introduce some type of animal-based product back into my diet, because I'm not getting enough omega-3s, and I don't like walnuts. And it's funny, because I actually recently just bought walnuts because I want to like try to see how I could eat it where I enjoy it. And it's just not something that I grew up eating. And when I had it, I just didn't like the flavor profile. And one thing that I didn't want to do was eat something I didn't enjoy just for the sake of the nutrients of it. I'm not going to stay consistent with it. The only way I know I'll stay consistent with it is if I could enjoy it and I know that I'm getting the nutrients from the thing that I'm eating. But to me, if I'm eating it like a chore to make sure I get the nutrients from it, I'm not going to stay consistent with it, because now I have to spend money on getting this thing that I don't even like. I'm not doing that. And so I really had to think about if I wanted to introduce salmon again. And one thing that I started asking myself, I was like, did I have any issues with this food before I went vegan? And when it came to salmon, when it came to eggs, those are the two things that I did not really have an issue with at all with my body. Like I never had any type of negative feedback from it. I remember the first time I decided to try introducing salmon again, and I felt so guilty eating it because I'm like, I'm supposed to be vegan. Like, why am I eating this? Like, I feel like the vegan gods are gonna come after me. And then after a while, I was like, this is ridiculous. I shouldn't have to feel negative over prioritizing my health because then I'm like, I'm not vegan anymore. I'm like, if I'm not vegan anymore, I'm not vegan anymore. Like, it's fine. You will survive. And so I ended up deciding to introduce salmon again. But when I started to introduce animal-based products again, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing it in a frivolous way. I wanted to make sure I was doing it in a way where it was logical, it made sense, and I was getting the most nutrients from it. That's when I found the difference between the farm-raised salmon versus the wild-caught salmon. And I will never get farm-raised salmon unless I'm like craving salmon and I'm out at a restaurant or something and they probably use farm-raised salmon. I just don't know. I think that would probably be the only time I'll ever get farm-raised, but I legit avoid farm-raised salmon and I only get wild-caught salmon because that's where the nutrients lie when it comes to salmon. So when I decided to introduce salmon again, I was like, all right, if I'm going to introduce salmon again, I'm going to make sure it's wild caught and I'm going to only buy it from certain places. I'm not just going to buy my salmon anywhere. Another thing that I wanted to do was also buy it fresh instead of frozen. However, lately, trying to find wild-caught salmon has been the most hardest task. I don't think this year I've ever been able to find wild-caught salmon. And maybe I'm just in the wrong season, but that's been a freaking struggle. So I ended up going to Trader Joe's and finding their salmon and their wild-caught salmon, and then it would just be previously frozen but it would be unfrozen like when you get it. I was originally getting it from Costco until I saw a video of someone posting their salmon where a worm was coming out of it. And then I was like, absolutely not. We're not doing that anymore. And so I was getting my salmon either from Whole Foods or Publix or Trader Joe's. When I started introducing salmon and started to eat it, I honestly felt a lot better because I now have another source of getting omega-3s and I don't have to just rely on chia seeds or trying to force myself to eat walnuts. And I really was trying to get into flaxseed and flaxseed meal. However, I was like wasting the bag because I really wasn't using it as much. So I like the idea that I was starting to have alternative ways of getting one simple nutrient. Another thing that I ended up doing was deciding to add eggs back into my diet because number one, I was eating way too much tofu. When I say I was starting to get annoyed with having tofu every day because I would have it for breakfast and I would have it for dinner, and it became to the point where I had to like plan out my meals in advance to see if I was actually going to have tofu for dinner, because if I was, then I wanted to avoid it for breakfast, and then now I had to figure out what the hell I'm going to eat for breakfast. So having to make tofu scrambled eggs at first is cute and fun because you're like creating this one thing out of something else and creating a whole different meal. But the issue was having a lot of soy and then having to use a lot of salt. So one thing that I started doing was deciding to add in eggs again, but again, being cautious of how I was eating it. So when I ate eggs when I was younger, it really was buying the one that had like the cheaper price, probably like one above the cheaper price. I really didn't pay attention to making sure I was getting the best eggs. And it wasn't until, again, when I was like watching a lot of health documentaries, and that's when I was just learning about the quality of eggs. So the same thing that I did with the salmon is the same thing that I started to do when it came to adding eggs again. And it was being cautious of the types of eggs that I was getting. So it's funny because I never, ever thought I would be paying the amount that I pay for eggs. Like before, when I would get eggs, it would be like $2, $3, and I was fine with that, you know? The amount that I pay for eggs now is absolutely ridiculous, but I remind myself, I'm like, it's for the quality, it's for the quality, it's for the quality. Honestly, the only brand that I get now are the pasture raised ones, mainly because I believe they are farm raised, like they're raised on the farm and they're like outside in nature, so they eat hopefully more like worms and actual like nutrients that they're supposed to eat. But again, the main reason for me introducing eggs again was, number one, I never had an issue when it came to eggs. And number two, I love eggs. And for three, I didn't want to keep having tofu so much, and I feel like I was just overdoing it on the amount of tofu that I was eating. So that is why I decided to introduce eggs again. Another thing that I started doing that was honestly probably the hardest too for me was first switching from vegan butter to animal-based grass-fed butter, because number one, I'm really not like, my body doesn't respond well to milk, so I was just really hesitant on switching to animal butter. But when I started to be more mindful of what was actually in the butter that I was getting for a vegan butter, I was so irritated at the fact that I was just like, I'm basically eating solidified seed oils, which are not good for our health. It causes inflammation. It's just overall bad for our health. And I'm basically eating solidified seed oils instead of thinking that I'm having something natural for my body. So one thing that I did to actually test this out was when I had first transitioned to veganism, one thing that I liked getting from Dollar Tree was getting their popcorn. I am not really a popcorn person, but for some reason I started really enjoying the Dollar Tree popcorn. But when I went vegan, of course I couldn't eat that because it had like the butter in there, and I was weaning off of that. So I started just getting the popcorn kettles and using nutritional yeast for the cheese flavor, and using plant-based butter for the butter. And one thing that I found irritating was like my stomach would start to hurt after a while. Like it just felt like my body had like a hard time digesting it. But I always thought it was the kernels causing the issue and not necessarily the butter itself. So one thing that I did was I was like, you know what, let me test this out with the animal butter, the animal-based grass-fed butter. And I really wanted to make sure I got grass-fed butter because, again, if I'm going to introduce animal products back into my diet, I'm going to make sure that I do it in a way where I'm getting the most benefits of the nutrients from it. And I didn't have any stomach issues. And I was like, oh, so here I'm thinking that I'm having the stomach issues from the popcorn kernel itself and about to throw away the whole container, when really it was from the butter that I was using. So from that point on, I started really being sold on just using grass-fed butter. And it's really interesting of realizing, like, when you start to switch out animal products for plant-based products or vegan products, really be mindful of the ingredients, because sometimes you're better off just getting the animal-based products as opposed to the plant-based. And one thing that triggered my mind to start thinking that way was when there was like a uptick in a lot of people going and trying more plant-based, and then all of a sudden all these plant-based things started coming out. And at first I was so excited because I was like, oh wow, like there's more options to choose from. But then on the flip side, I'm like, where did all of these options come from? And then I thought about the fact of like how veganism started, and it was more from raw foods and natural foods, whole foods, and then now we're just selling a whole bunch of processed vegan foods. And so that's where my mindset ended up going, for me to really be okay with adding more animal products back into my diet, because I'm like, there should be no reason for us to now have all of these weird things that are now invented out of nowhere. And that was never the original intention when it came to veganism and when it came to plant-based. So if that's something that you're really thinking of just cutting down the amount of animal products that you're using, be mindful of what you're switching that alternative to, because it actually may cause more harm than good. Before I end up going into where I'm at now and where I plan on going in the future of my own health journey, I do want to share that even though I'm no longer vegan, I feel like it was so beneficial for me to make that change, because number one, it helped me become more confident in my food choices. I don't really get swayed by food marketers anymore. I think before I was always confused on what to eat, what not to eat, what's healthy, what's not healthy, looking at all these things of like, they're like, go vegan, go keto, go plant-based, go this, go that. It was just overwhelming. Counting calories, don't count calories, intuitive eating, not intuitive eating. It was a lot. And when I ended up going vegan, it then helped me really understand my body and understand food and understand food marketing. Because when you then have like this base of what to go off of what your body gets energy from and how you feel from the foods that you're eating. It then no longer plays a role of what's going on externally. So for me personally, I don't really regret going vegan because it helped me remove a lot of foods that was causing my body a lot more harm than good. And it also helped me introduce a lot of foods that I didn't eat previously. So I was never someone who had dates. I never heard of dates. I never ate chickpeas. I never ate lentils, but those are now things that are in my diet. Before, I never ate cauliflower. I hated cauliflower, but then I found all these different fun recipes to make using cauliflower that now cauliflower is part of one of my staple foods. And even though like my mom made a lot of home cooked meals, a lot of the things that I eat now are not the things that I ate before growing up. But I really enjoyed being able to try and have new foods added to my diet and not only rely on what I grew up on and really expanding my flavor profile. So I don't really regret going vegan because it opened me up to a lot more things. It made me more confident in my food choices, and it just made me get exposed to the food industry and what is actually good to eat, what I should avoid, and what I should be listening to, and a lot of things that I should just be like, that's not for me. Where I'm at now of what I'm doing, I also started introducing chicken again, mainly because I've gotten to the weight that I want to be. And I remember one time like just wanting to lose weight. And then when I finally lost weight, I felt like I looked like a stick. Like I had no figure, no nothing. So one thing that I did differently this time was I was like, I'm going to lose the weight that I want to get to and then start toning my body. And then that's when I started being more active and proactive with protein. And one of the ways that I feel like that was more beneficial was to have some type of animal-based protein of using mainly chicken. And again, chicken was something that never really affected me. I just didn't like chicken like that. So that's why I took a while of adding it back. But me adding chicken back into my diet again is more for protein purposes. And it has honestly been extremely beneficial with keeping me full a lot longer. So when I had first went vegan, I was honestly getting really full off of eating like one, no more than 2 meals a day. But then over time, for some reason, I felt like I was getting hungry a lot more. And so when I decided to introduce chicken again, I was really cautious of how I wanted to do it. And so one thing that I did was I had the chicken bowl from Cava. I was like, you know what, before I decide to buy chicken, let me have it from an outside place. So I ended up having chicken, and even though Cava bowls usually like fill me up, I felt so full like earlier than I usually would. And when I started eating more chicken again, I realized I was getting a lot fuller than I usually do. And I felt like it was just doing a lot of benefits for my body. And so when I do get chicken now, I'm still learning the best place to get my chicken. But one thing that I decided to do is like, if I'm gonna have chicken, I'm going to make sure 9 times out of 10, I'm making it myself. And if I do eat it out, I'm eating it out only at certain places. And I'm not going and eating like fried chicken. I think I only had fried chicken one time when it was a Chick-fil-A because my housing complex was giving away free Chick-fil-A, and then I don't know if I missed it or it just never happened, and then I was really craving it, and I got a Chick-fil-A sandwich with a lettuce wrap and their lemonade, and it was so good. Like that was like one of the healthiest, not healthiest, I guess healthy because it was a lettuce wrap, but the chicken was fried, but it was so good. Like that Chick-fil-A lettuce sandwich was so good, and it had like a little side of fruit, and that lemonade was delicious. But I'm much more cautious of how I get the chicken, and I'm still learning the best place of where I want to go to get it, and still learning the best brands to get and where to get those brands. But it is something that I started adding back into my diet more so because of my workouts and wanting to add more protein to my meals. I've also been thinking about adding one source of red meat. My only issue when it came to red meat was I had a lot of acid reflux when it came to it, and it was like a hard time for my body to digest it. So I've been really going back and forth when it comes to red meat, but one thing that I want to do is I want to increase my iron, and the way that I know I could do that is increasing my red meat. I don't think I would have it as often. I really won't. I won't have it as often as me having like my eggs or salmon or chicken, and I'll probably have it like once, maybe twice a month. But one red meat that I've been looking at introducing is having lamb, just because I feel like it's one of the more leaner meats, and I'm not a steak person. I'm not a burgers person. I'm not really a red meat person in general, but I feel like when it comes to lamb, it's something that I really, really enjoy when I had it. And I would love to add liver back, because I love me some liver and onions growing up. I just don't know how to make it, and my boyfriend hates it, but I'm not gonna make like a whole pot of liver and onions just to eat it myself. But if I was to introduce liver again, that would be something I would be really, really happy to have. I would just need my mom to teach me how to make it, because all I remember is her doing a bang, and when I heard that bang, I knew we was having some liver and onions, and I knew I was about to eat real good that night. But I wanted to share this video because it's just like, I don't think that there is one size fits all diet. I don't believe in like everyone could go keto and be fine, everyone could go carnivore and go fine, everyone could go plant-based and go fine. I think at one point I did believe like everyone could be plant-based, but paying attention to my own journey and realizing like that's not always the case, and just learning how to pay attention to your body and what your body enjoys more of and what your body probably rejects more of. For me personally, some people can handle cheese. Even though macaroni and cheese is my absolute favorite food, my body can't handle cheese. So I just prefer to not have it, because I don't want to feel like crap after eating it, and just because I'm eating something that I enjoy. Like, it's just, to me, it's not worth it. But for other people, that may be the case. And then for me personally, I just like to have something to where there's some type of nutrient added to my meals, and I'm not just eating it just to eat it. So when it comes to deciding whether to go vegan or not, I would say to really pay attention to your body, and at first just introducing more natural foods, introducing more whole foods, and seeing which ones your body tends to gravitate to more of. I used to say that I'm plant-based, but I eat this type of food, but now it's just like, because I eat so many, like one type of like animal products in general, I just say I eat like more natural foods, and I don't really call myself vegan anymore, because I'm nowhere near on that spectrum anymore. So I really wanted to just share my journey on me going vegan and no longer being vegan. I hope this video, you found it helpful. If it's something you've been thinking about, if it's something where you're vegan and you're thinking about swapping and switching to eating some animal-based products. To me personally, I feel like not everything of veganism is healthy, and so that's where my mindset is, and then just learning what works for your body. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you got any value out of it, definitely make sure you hit that subscribe button and the like button, and I will see you guys in the next video.